And we are back for the Thousand Worlds Book Club, and we're talking about Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg.
Oh my god, Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg. It's my favorite story.
What, really, Brandon? You like it?
No, dumbass.
Well, our guest this week is Dolores Ed. Oh, you brought me in for the greatest of George R.R. Martin tales. I don't see why these stories need to be reviewed. I'm not sure they needed to be viewed. I think people should keep their wandering eyes to themselves. That's how fights break out. Well, yes, Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg is not exactly a favorite of many people, including our author. The story was published in 1976 in a magazine called Amazing Science Fiction, formerly known as Amazing Stories, but the magazine had fallen in popularity in the 70s and only had a circulation of about 25,000. After this, the story never appears again. George doesn't include it in any of his collections. This video may introduce it to more people than its actual publication. If it weren't for crazy fans tracking down this old story, it would have died a nice quiet death. Yeah, I would like a nice quiet death, but in my experience, death is pretty noisy and doesn't have very much good to say. Well, I guess it's more interesting than most people at the end of the day. So Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg does have the honor of being the first story in the Corpse Handler trilogy, of which the third story, Meat House Man, is pretty darn stellar in my opinion. There is some debate on whether the Corpse Handler trilogy is even part of the Thousand Worlds. In Dream Songs, George says it's not part of the continuity, but at the same time, the story references Old Earth, New Home, Silver Sky, and other first-generation human worlds that are the base of the Thousand Worlds universe. Granted, we have no references to Harangans, Findi, the Double War, or the Interregnum, but there's no reason why this story couldn't be set in the Thousand Worlds universe prior to the expansion of the Federal Empire and the Double War. So Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg is a fairly simple tale and very similar to the theme of the Stone City. Our protagonist deals with bureaucracy, a rigged system, and visits loser friends. It's about the need to escape shit places, and once again, it's a story about George R.R. Martin's life growing up in Bayonne, New Jersey. Our protagonist beat the odds and escaped his shit planet, just like our author beat the odds and escaped his shit town. So our story follows Sykes, who has returned home to his home world of New Pittsburg for a mystery reason. Sykes is a corpse handler, and aided by technology, he can telepathically control human corpses and provide cheap human labor. His home planet of New Pittsburg is run by a fairly sinister company called the New Pittsburg Company, which keeps nearly all living people in effective slavery. The workers are paid little, work in dangerous environments, and have hidden fees all over the place. If you screw up and commit a crime, you're transformed into a working corpse. So Sykes begins the story by dropping off his 3 corpses at a corpse depot, and we are introduced to the many ways that the company nickels and dimes people. Bad exchange rates, late fees, poor services. Sykes is required to pay to house his corpses for the night, but the service is nothing more than an empty room, and the company bears no responsibility for damage. Sykes remembers his childhood a bit, and a man named Bannon, who taught him how to be a corpse handler and allowed him once to watch a conversion of a man from being alive to becoming a controlled corpse. That man had killed someone, but Sykes sees that now people are being converted to becoming corpses for simple assault. Sykes then heads to the bar and runs into some old acquaintances. He finds out that half of his old friends are dead, some from health reasons, and others from accidents. The company itself is not doing well financially, which is why things have gotten worse on New Pittsburg. Sykes listens to some hard luck tales from the locals. The company doesn't give work to people unless they are desperate and willing to work in dangerous places. Rent, depot fees, imported food. These all cause the workers to lose more money than they earn, and they all end up trapped. Sykes oddly has little sympathy for them. He tells them that they've acted stupidly. They had opportunities to get out, and they didn't take them. The locals complain and say they never really had a chance, but Sykes is the exception and proof that escape is possible. He got off the planet as a corpse handler, despite the fact that his father never really taught him any useful skills. Sykes' closer friends then arrive at the bar, and they drink and they have a good time. In the morning, Sykes gets ready to leave, and we discover why he came to New Pittsburg in the first place. He wanted to visit his father's grave. He notes that his father's grave is no different from a typical corpse grave. And then Sykes leaves. Wow, it's a happy ending. We don't have many of those with our author. Or in life. Well, I suppose there's happy endings in Molestown. Yeah, I suppose it's a happy ending for our protagonist. The rest of the story is so depressing that George R. R. Martin had to give us something, I suppose. As with the Stone City, the story establishes a pretty brutal metaphor for anyone in a dead-end job or a poor financial situation. They are nothing more than walking corpses being controlled and used by the system. Profit is taken by the company, while loss is taken by the individual. And as the economy goes down, it only gets worse and worse for the common man. They are just mindless bodies to be exploited by the system, and then they die. Man, life must have really sucked in Bayonne, New Jersey. Oh, I would have loved to live in a place like Bayonne. At least they had clean water. Nothing beats a good cup of clean water. It helps wash down the taste of unclean water. Well, we talked a bit about our author's feelings about our economic system in the Stone City. And here again, George definitely feels that poor working conditions and a rigged system are akin to slavery. That said, he once again shows his frustration at people for not using their brains and escaping the system. So I guess the message is, yes, the system is horribly rigged, but it's your fault as well. Yeah, I can understand that. It's like that time I was hungry and I ate that rotten meat. The meat had done its best to make me lose my appetite, smelling bad and such. So really, I'm the one to blame. I'm not sure if that analogy works at all. Anyway, like the Stone City, there is a bit of melancholy about fathers in Nobody Ever Leaves New Pittsburg. Sykes has done better than his father, but in some ways blames his father for not doing more, but also seems saddened that his father never broke the cycle and escaped himself. I suppose all the anger and frustration at the locals was just veiled disappointment with his father or something. If there is one thing that sets this story apart from others, it's the angry perspective of the protagonist. Most of our protagonists so far have been fairly sad, introspective, and self-loathing. But Sykes is more jaded, bitter, and uncompromising, more so than any protagonist we've seen in any of his other work. And that is probably the point. It takes a hard personality to actually rise out of a rigged system. But it is striking as this story is so autobiographical. Our author was clearly very passionate and angry about our economic system and what it put him, his family, and his community through. Anyway, what's more interesting than the actual story is the science behind the corpse handling itself. Now, we've seen the telepathic control of other beings in Men of Greywater Station and in The Plague Star. And we've seen the either telepathic or telekinetic animation of dead beings in Night Flyers. I suppose this is more like Rika Dawnstar controlling the Tyrannosaurus Rex, as the bodies in this story are still alive, but just have computer brains. Still, the imagery of controlling a group of corpses reminds us very much of the Others. The Others, of course, seem to have the ability to telepathically control masses of dead. The zombies at the Fist of the First Men, for example, seemed coordinated. I'm not sure if this is because the whites have a hive mind, or because the many zombies have an other master. Perhaps it's a bit of both. Veramir Sixskins could also control many bodies at once. He was the prime controller, though his consciousness was still blended with his animals. And I can't really say too much else about this story. We covered much of this theme with the Stone City, and we'll be talking more about corpse handling with its sequel, Override. The link for Override is below, and it's worth noting that 2 more Thousand Worlds stories have been found. One is called Warship, and the other is The Runners. You can find them below as well. I'd like to thank Dolores Ed. Oh, I don't like to be thanked. Thanking is for good deeds, and no good deed goes unpunished. And we will see you next time.